So to hit another aspect of, isn't religion about truth? Historical truth. Religions, let's take the Bible, tells the story of history, right? The beginning of the world. Even if we ignore creation for a second, let's say the formation of the people of Israel, etc., how they got out of slavery. Isn't that a historical claim that is subject to historical analysis, like truth kind of thing? So again, religion has to be thought of in a different way. If we try to treat religious history in the same plane as we treat other types of history, subject to academic, I wouldn't say scientific in the same way as, let's say, hard sciences, but academic, quasi-scientific analysis, again, religion often does not hold up very well. There are definitely parts of religious history that are historically accurate, but there are parts that are not, and there are parts that are clearly not. Isn't that a problem? So let me give an example of what I'm talking about between history and religion, so you can see what I'm thinking and why there really is a large difference between these. So let's take the question of who were the first Europeans to discover America. So for a long time, we're thinking Christopher Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci, the whole move of Spain and Portugal and Italy in the 15th, early 16th century. Then people got in touch with Norwegian history, Danish history, and began to read the stories of the explorations of the Vikings, and they found a claim that Viking sailors had gotten to Canada, to Newfoundland, 500 years earlier. Now, is that true or not true? Let's take it in the scientific sense, historical sense. How do we go about trying to figure that out? So there is archaeological evidence, right? In Newfoundland, they found evidence of settlements from that period of time. Descriptions in the text of how they got there that came from before the period of Columbus. So they're correct about the placement of land, right? So that's a piece of evidence that they might actually know what they're talking about, that it really did happen. The description of the natives, what they call the Skerries, which is the description of Inuit, seems to fit what we know about them. So when historians went to study it, they say, this document, right? These stories, the Vinland sagas, whatever they're called, of the various names depending on which one we're looking at, that describe the trip of Bjarni or other names to this region, seem to be correct. So, right? That's a factual claim. If they had found no archaeological evidence, if there was possibility that it was forged and it came after the time of Columbus, so the author might have already known and been able to retroject back, there'd all be reasons that you might be skeptical about it and say, no, that didn't happen, right? That is a scientific historical analysis. Also, and very important, it's not hard to believe, since Vikings had very good boat technology. We know they got all the way out to Greenland. We know that they were explorers. It seems very much, doesn't mean they did, but it's not a hard claim in the sense of it's not a shocking, how could that have been? We need to rethink all the past, right? It makes sense. It did happen, did not happen, so it looks like it did, but the claim makes sense. Now, when we take a biblical, let's say historical claim, that Israel is founded by a guy, Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, who had 12 sons, and each son became a tribe, and that's how Israel was formed. Now that, even before we start analyzing it in the sense of, do we have looking for archaeological evidence, looking for this, looking for that, we first have to say, wow, unlike the Viking story, that's going to require a huge amount of evidence. Like Dawkins likes to say, right? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, because that's generally not how countries are formed. If you think about it, I once facetiously wrote an article about America being founded by George Washington and his 13 sons, right? Georgia and the twins, North and South Carolina and Virginia, etc., etc. The point being, obviously, that is not how history is there. When I was in England, I did it, Britain the Great and his four sons, Angle, Wales, Eyre, and Scott. It's the same concept. The point being that we know in our guts, we know that is not how countries are formed, right? That's a myth. Now, is it impossible? No, but it's very, very, very unlikely. And it would require a ton of evidence to say that this country, that is how it happened. On top of that, when we look at the Bible, you can see that this model goes for everything, right? So Abraham has other sons. One of them is the founder of the Arabic people. We have even the idea that Noah, let's put aside the Noah story for a second. We'll dedicate maybe a whole talk to the Noah story because a lot of people like to think about that one. There's a lot to say there. But Noah has 3 sons, and those sons have 70 sons, grandsons, great-grandsons, and that makes up to 70 nations of the earth, right? All descended from him. So what we're seeing is, wait a second, there's a pattern. The Bible likes to describe the relationship between large groups of people, whether it's countries, nations, tribes, as family. Now, once you have that, you say, oh, so it's not so surprising that the Bible would do that with Israel, right? Jacob becoming Israel and its 12 sons. So, insofar as history, also, it doesn't go very well that way. So, for example, some of the different places of the tribes look to have some ethnic differences. Like, for example, the tribe Issachar seems to be, more ethnically Canaanite than some of the other groups. You have in the Mesha inscription, which is an inscription by the king of Moab, a neighbor, also supposedly a cousin of ours, right? The son of Abraham's nephew Lot. The king of that country in the 8th century writes about Gad, the tribe of Gad. But he doesn't call it a tribe of Israel. He just refers to it as his own people that have always lived here. And seems to see Israel as conquering them or dominating them. So, and even in the biblical depictions, it's sometimes strange. The 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 sons, but not exactly, because actually there's Ephraim and Manasseh. And Ephraim and Manasseh, they are the sons of Joseph, and Levi is also a tribe, but he's not a tribe with land, so there's 13 tribes. There seems to be also multiple traditions about this. Sometimes in the list of tribes, they come out different. Machir is mentioned by, sometimes, or Gilead. Both of those are not considered tribes in the Pentateuch, but appear in other places as a tribe. So, it seems to be that the explanation of 12 sons of Jacob is a artificial mythic construct that is made to explain a reality of these tribes. And the 12 is itself perhaps a number that's being forced, right? So there can only be 12, so we have to keep changing which are the 12 because there are multiple tribes and maybe there was some fluidity there. That's insofar as history is concerned. There's other things we could say about history, but you get the point. Now, what does that mean? If the Bible if the validity of the Bible inhered in it being true in a historical sense, then we'd say, whoa, this is a real problem. This is not accurate. Just like Herodotus has a million things that are not accurate, like headless people and such, this is not accurate. However, that is not what the end-all and be-all of the Bible is. People have myths. Like we talked about in a previous talk, myths help people tell story about their lives that makes sense to them and gives them a place. So to some extent, what's going on in Israel, in the Bible about Israel, is saying that from how the Israelites, this people, this nation, this country, whenever it is it was written, whatever the people were at the time, need to think of themselves as a family. Israel is a kind of family. Right? And that feeling certainly has extended well into history and certainly into Jewish history. I'll just give you an example that I've always found very powerful. That when Hurricane Katrina hit, and a lot of Jews were along with everybody else, were sent to different places. The rabbis throughout all the communities started saying, okay, we got to go and find out if there's any Jews who need homes. And one friend of mine who was a rabbi in Texas told me the story that it was right before Shabbat, and on the Sabbath, he was an Orthodox rabbi who doesn't drive, doesn't do anything. Like about an hour or two before, they heard that there was 2 Jewish people in the stadium that that hadn't found homes, and he drove out there looking for them. He found out that they did find in the end, and he got back before Shabbat, and everything was fine. But that idea that no, we're a family, just like if my nieces or nephews or something like that, I found out they were stranded somewhere, I would immediately go out and pick them up and bring them home because they're a family. Israel is meant to think of themselves as a family. There are other lessons we can have, but the point is that the value of the model does not have to be historical. Whether they in the past they ever thought it was historical or not doesn't really matter. The point is we know with pretty strong confidence that it's not historical, but that doesn't make it less valuable if you accept what I'm saying is sort of the Prisma synergistic religion model, that religion is not about that kind of truth. There are many other truths. We're going to explore tons of religious truths over time, but partly I just want to shed the idea that we're trying to prove that it is somehow historically true. That is a dead end, and that does not get us to the real meaning of religion in our days.